seated. On June 22nd, I tucked my little boy, Jackson, into bed, and then I walked around the corner to the movie theater near my house and watched Toy Story 3, which was excellent. And then I came home and updated my iPhone on my computer and did a little reading. And at about 10:30, my wife called the hospital to say that the false contractions she'd been having for a few days seemed to be turning and were becoming a little more rhythmic and a little more painful. The hospital said, well, you can come on in, but we're very busy, so if things aren't imminent, we're just going to send you right home. Jackson had taken 18 hours to push his way into the world, so we figured we had plenty of time. So we called Laura Gianello, who often sits right back there, and she came down and picked up Jackson to take him home, or to take him to her house for the night. And then Holly and I waddled down to the car and began the drive from Oakland out to Kaiser Walnut Creek. And by the time we got to the car, the contractions were coming more quickly and more painfully. So this was my excuse to run about 12 red lights and to drive 85 miles an hour down Highway 24, which I'd always wanted to do. And as we approached Walnut Creek, I looked over at my wife and I said, honey, I don't actually know where this hospital is. I've only been there one time. And she then gave me a look which suggested I had just been convicted of Nazi war crimes. Then her water broke. And so with some grunting directions from her and a few more red lights that I skated on through, we made it to the parking garage where, embarrassingly again, I had to ask security for directions to the birthing unit. Fortunately, they gave us a wheelchair and then we raced across the plaza, up the elevator, kind of waved at the registration people, and then 9 minutes later, we had a baby on the gurney. From door to birth took 35 minutes. So that, I thought appropriately, brings us to the story of miraculous births, like we heard from in the Genesis reading. As a proud and nervous and joyful dad, this whole journey through the last 9 months, right up to Lilly greeting the world with a triumphant grunt in the delivery room, seems miraculous to me. I still can't believe that a human being came out of my wife's belly, and that if we had been any more leisurely, that human being would have come out on the shoulder of the highway. It just seems kind of crazy and unlikely and comical that all of us enter the world through such unlikely ways. I think God has to be somewhere in that process. We end up relying on the hospitality of perfect strangers at the hospital to deliver the baby, and then we end up with a brand new human being with a tiny little beating heart and miniature fingers and miniature toes. Now the Bible is actually full of stories that are much more miraculous than the one that Holly and I just went through. Throughout the Bible, God keeps the dream of Israel alive by constantly interceding in the reproductive process over and over. Speaking of the reproductive process, there's my wife and baby right there. She loves attention. Now, the first case of these miraculous birth stories is actually the one we just heard in Genesis. As we heard, Abraham and Sarah become pregnant with Isaac when they are 90 years old. And the next story that happens is Isaac's story. Isaac and Rebekah give birth to Jacob and Esau. And Esau is supposed to have the birthright, but through some funny circumstances, Jacob ends up with the birthright, and he ends up carrying on the line that becomes Israel. Later on, we have Moses, who's supposed to be killed at birth, but the midwives save him, and then his mother floats him down the Nile, and he's saved once again by the Pharaoh's daughter. Later on in the Old Testament, we get the stories of Samson and Samuel. Then, in the New Testament, of course, we have the miraculous prophecy that precedes John the Baptist, and this tradition reaches its crescendo with Jesus' arrival through divine conception and shouting angels and wandering wise guys and shepherds and donkeys and the star and evil King Herod. We all know that story pretty well. So the question this morning